So picture a truck, right? Just idling at a border crossing somewhere in Europe. The trailer's packed with like $1 million worth of perishable goods, but the driver just can't move.
Right, because the border agent screen is just flashing red.
Exactly. And the delay has absolutely nothing to do with, customs inspections or missing paperwork in the cab.
Mm-hmm.
That truck is physically stopped because 3 hours earlier, an accountant clicked save on a digital invoice back at corporate headquarters.
And the company's internal software basically failed to instantly transmit a perfectly formatted XML file to a government tax API.
Yes. The algorithm rejected the invoice, so the government literally grounded the truck, which is just wild to think about.
It really is. I mean, it's a phenomenal way to visualize what is actually happening inside global enterprises right now. The physical movement of goods is, it's now entirely dependent on the hidden underlying plumbing of corporate software. If we use like a more traditional architectural metaphor, imagine building a massive state-of-the-art skyscraper. You pour millions of tons of concrete for the foundation, you frame out this glorious glass lobby, but you completely forget to map out the plumbing.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Adding those pipes later won't just be incredibly expensive. I mean, you are literally going to have to tear up the concrete floors while people are trying to live and work in the building.
And that is exactly the trap the world's biggest companies are falling into right now with their financial software. And really, that brings us to the core of our deep dive today.
Exactly.
We are exploring this hidden foundational design document that dictates the financial and, honestly, the technological future of massive global enterprises. It's called the SAP FICO Blueprint.
Right. And for anyone not living and breathing this stuff, SAP is, one of the world's largest providers of ERP systems, enterprise resource planning software.
Basically, the central nervous system of a major corporation.
Yeah. Exactly. And FICO stands for Financial Accounting and Controlling. It's the specific part of that software that, records the company's money.
Right. And so we're pulling from two highly specialized sources today to understand this massive shift in how these blueprints work. We have a really detailed article looking at what system architects urgently need to rethink regarding these blueprints.
Yeah. And then we have this stark, almost warning bell of a blog post detailing how making the wrong design decisions here will literally cost organizations millions of dollars.
Millions.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to decode how enterprise financial design isn't just about, debit and credit accounting anymore. It actually dictates a company's real-world legal compliance, its ability to adopt artificial intelligence, and its risk of just falling into a massive technical debt trap.
Right.
So for you listening, whether you're, prepping for a high-stakes IT strategy meeting, or maybe you're a finance manager trying to understand why your ERP system is so frustrating to use.
Which is a lot of people, by the way.
Right. Oh, totally. Or even if you're just a curious learner who loves understanding the hidden gears of global business. This discussion is going to reveal why the most boring-sounding corporate meetings actually hold the highest stakes.
Because the decisions made in those boring meetings, they compound over time, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
In the past, a well-done FICO blueprint was basically invisible. Those static blue and white lines on a page just quietly supported the business. But today, you have to imagine those lines suddenly needing to shift and turn into glowing, real-time digital data streams.
Right. The SAP FICO Blueprint defines the entire organizational structure of a company's financial reality, right?
Yeah.
Company codes, the chart of accounts, controlling areas, document structures, all of it.
Exactly. And traditionally, the rule of thumb was that if you map this out poorly, it becomes a permanent constraint. I mean, you can't just delete a structural category if you have 5 years of financial history tied to it.
It gets exponentially more expensive to undo as the system accumulates historical data. But, the context around that historical data has completely shifted. We are now living in what the sources call a real-time compliance world.
Yes, this is the biggest change. Tax authorities are no longer waiting for the end of the year to check your math.
Right. They aren't looking at retrospective summaries anymore.
No, they're validating transactions as they occur. There are continuous reporting mandates now that require standardized, machine-readable data instantly.
We're moving from a retrospective world to a proactive, real-time world.
Driven by something called continuous transaction controls, or CTC.
CTC, right.
Governments around the world have basically realized that waiting for an end-of-year audit leaves this massive gap where tax revenue simply disappears, either through manual errors or just outright fraud.
But, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Surely, a government tax authority shouldn't really care about how my internal accounting software is wired, right? If I pay my tax bill at the end of the day, why are they poking around in my system's plumbing?
Because they don't want to see a summary of your invoices 12 months from now. They want to see the specific data of the invoice the literal second it is generated.
Wow.
Yeah. Instead of an accountant printing a PDF and mailing it, your ERP system has to ping a government API via an encrypted file, and the government's algorithm instantly replies with an approval code before you can legally finalize the transaction.
So they want to validate the sale before the truck even leaves your loading dock, like the truck in our in-tray.
Exactly. That's why the job of the system architect has fundamentally changed. They aren't just designing a neat reporting structure for the CFO to look at on a Friday afternoon anymore. They're designing the core data architecture for government algorithms.
And really, they're building the foundation for external AI systems that will need to read and interpret that enterprise data instantly.
Right. Which means the blueprint has to answer a very foundational architecture question early on. The biggest one, honestly.
Which is where the tax logic lives, right?
Exactly. Do you embed all the complex jurisdiction-specific tax codes, the value-added tax or VAT rates and the condition records directly inside your core ERP system? Or do you put that logic somewhere else?
So the sources say the conventional legacy approach is to just shove it all into the core SAP system.
Yeah, which feels safe to the implementation teams because it's the environment they already know.
But it is incredibly fragile because tax laws change constantly.
Constantly. If you hard-code the tax rate for every county, province, and country into your core ERP system, just consider what happens when Spain changes its VAT rate on a Tuesday.
Oh, man.
You have to open up the core system, rewrite the configuration, and test the entire enterprise software landscape just to accommodate one regulatory change.
It's like using your car's core engine computer to also run your GPS maps.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, because every time a new street opens up or a road gets closed, you do not want to have to take your car to the mechanic and reprogram the literal engine block.
No, you definitely don't.
You want to keep the ERP system incredibly stable and let a dedicated GPS device handle the constantly changing roads.
Exactly. And that is why the modern scalable approach is externalization. The ERP system should simply serve as a first-pass classification.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning it just looks at the transaction and says, this is a sale of software to a business partner in Germany, and that's it.
Okay.
Then, through an API, an external compliance platform, your dedicated GPS takes that clean data, applies the highly detailed, frequently changing tax logic, and calculates the exact requirement.
So the engine stays untouched.
The engine stays completely untouched.
Yep.
Embedding tax logic inside the core system builds just a mountain of technical debt. It manifests as these nightmare software upgrade projects down the road.
Right, because you can't even update the core enterprise software without breaking your custom tax rules.
Exactly. There's a crucial quote from the source material that summarizes this whole integration architecture principle perfectly. It says, SAP should be the most reliable source of clean financial data in the enterprise. The moment you ask it to also be a compliance system, you have asked it to be two things, and it will do both less well than a system designed for each purpose separately.
That makes total sense. So if the core engine shouldn't be calculating these complex taxes, its only job is to hand over perfect raw materials to that external GPS.
Right.
But that really begs the question, what exactly needs to be in that raw data for the government to accept it? Which brings us to the document structure.
Yes. This is where the rubber really meets the road for real-time compliance. Traditionally, blueprint teams would sit around and design document structures based on what the internal accounting team needs to see.
They ask, what data do we need to close our own books?
Exactly. But in a continuous transaction control environment, the external platforms need highly specific, machine-readable fields.
Like what kind of fields?
We're talking about the business partner's VAT registration numbers, line item tax classifications, very specific delivery addresses, fiscal representative identifiers, document reference numbers, things like that.
And those fields must be present in the document structure and populated at the exact point of document creation.
They have to be. You cannot retrospectively enforce a validation downstream.
But I mean, surely software is flexible?
Yeah.
Let's say I realize a year from now that I missed a delivery address field on my invoices. Can't I just push a quick software patch? Why is that considered an unmitigated catastrophe by these system architects?
Because you are dealing with the compounding nature of databases. By the time you realize that field is missing, Thousands of users across your global company have entered millions of financial documents without that delivery address data.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
If you try to retrofit the document structure when all that history already exists, it is a massive, incredibly expensive remediation project. You have basically broken the chain of data continuity.
Because you can't just paste an address onto a digital invoice that was mathematically filed and audited 6 months ago.
No, you can't. You are trying to rebuild the plumbing while the water is already flowing. You have to design the document structure as a regulatory submission template from day one. You have to ask, what does the government validation platform need to see before you ever post the first transaction?
Okay, but even if you have the perfect document structure, right, say you have all the right fields perfectly mapped out, it is still completely useless if the data being typed into those fields is garbage.
Very true.
So we have to talk about master data governance and organizational structure.
Yes, master data is the absolute foundation that everything else depends on. If the inputs are wrong, the real-time compliance outputs will be instantly flagged by the tax authorities.
The sources talk a lot about this concept of entity clarity. Apparently, legal entities in an ERP system often reflect a company's internal management reporting rather than their actual tax registration reality.
Yeah, this happens all the time. Your internal VP might want to see a dashboard simply labeled, I don't know, North American sales or European sales because that's how they track profits.
Right.
But the tax authority in France doesn't care about your internal European sales division. They care about the specific legally registered French entity.
And if your system only knows the VP's version, your compliance is completely broken.
Exactly. That misalignment forces a tremendous amount of manual, error-prone reconciliation for global enterprises. Every legal entity with a tax obligation must be clearly and distinctly represented like Acme Corp. LLC French Entity 401 in the organizational structure.
So master data quality itself is a blueprint decision. It's not just a data entry afterthought.
Not at all.
The sources are very clear that business partner VAT registration numbers must be validated against official government registries. Not just checking if the format looks right, but actually pinging an external database to validate it.
Right. Material and service classifications have to align perfectly with tax treatments. The plant and company code addresses must be exact.
This requires workflow enforcement built directly into the system architecture. You have to build the gates into the system itself.
Yes, a business partner shouldn't even be allowed to be used in a transaction until all of those compliance-critical fields are validated and approved by a centralized governance team.
It's like letting a complete stranger walk right into a high-security building without checking their ID at the front door, letting them wander around the facility, and then acting surprised when the vault alarms go off.
Perfect analogy.
You have to stop them at the door. The source material refers to these not as typos, but as structural data governance failures.
Because every compliance failure in a live system traces back to what was not decided in the blueprint phase. It traces back to the governance that wasn't specified, the validations that weren't enforced at the front door. If you don't build a security checkpoint, unauthorized data gets into the vault.
Right. Okay, so if all of these decisions, where tax logic lives, what the document contains, how master data is governed, if these save millions of dollars and prevent massive legal headaches, why are brilliant system implementation teams consistently getting them wrong?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. I mean, these are incredibly smart people building these enterprise landscapes.
It honestly comes down to who is physically sitting in the room when the blueprint is being drawn up. The sources detail a phenomenon they call the missing design session.
The missing design session.
Yeah, think about it. The well-attended blueprint workshops, the ones where everyone shows up with coffee and donuts, are the ones focused on the organizational structure and the chart of accounts.
Right.
The ignored workshops, the ones that get pushed to Friday afternoon and then eventually canceled, are about tax determination, document structure, and compliance APIs.
So the practical barrier here isn't even a technical one. It's
Right.
entirely organizational.
Exactly. Indirect tax specialists are routinely left out of FICO blueprint workshops. The functional SAP architects, as brilliant as they are at system design, they simply do not know what they do not know about global indirect tax compliance.
I mean, they aren't tax lawyers.
Right. And they aren't monitoring the daily legislative changes in 50 different countries.
So they build a beautiful, perfectly functioning financial system that completely fails The moment a real-time regulatory mandate hits it.
Exactly, which is why the sources give a very specific 5-point checklist of what architects absolutely must add to their blueprint process to prevent this.
Okay, let's go through that checklist. What's the first one?
So the first item on that checklist is a CTC field coverage review. Before a single line of code is configured, the architects need to cross-reference their proposed document structure against the actual data mandates of global tax authorities.
They need to ensure every required field actually exists in the blueprint.
Right. Then the second step is the tax determination architecture decision. The team has to explicitly decide, on the record, whether they are attempting to build tax logic into the core engine or if they are going to externalize it.
And assuming they do externalize it, the third step is the compliance API specification, right?
Exactly. This is mapping out the exact plumbing connecting the ERP engine to the external compliance platform. You have to define how the clean data gets out of the core system and how the tax calculation gets back in instantly and securely.
Okay, so that's 3. Fourth is the master data validation workflow, which goes back to building that security guard at the front door.
Right. The architects need to design the approval gates so bad data physically cannot enter the system in the first place.
And the fifth and final point.
The fifth point is a regulatory horizon assessment. You aren't just designing for what the tax authorities require today. You have to look like 3 to 5 years out.
What does that actually look like in practice, though, looking 3 to 5 years out?
Well, you might be designing a system for European operations today, but your blueprint needs to account for the European Union's VAT in the digital age mandate. It's often called VITA.
Oh, Vita, yeah.
Right, which is slated to completely overhaul digital reporting across the EU by roughly 2028. If your blueprint doesn't account for those upcoming structural shifts, your brand new system is already obsolete before you even turn it on.
Wow. So investing in indirect tax expertise upfront changes the compliance economics for the system's entire 10-year lifespan.
Completely. The source spells out the return on investment beautifully. They say, a blueprint session with the right tax expertise takes 1 extra day. Fixing the compliance gaps it prevents takes months, years, and millions. Invest in the day.
Invest in the day. It's the difference between building a foundation that can support a 70-story skyscraper versus one that just cracks under its own weight the moment you add a second floor. All right, let's pull all these threads together. Enterprise design decisions compound in both directions. Well-designed blueprints enable future, unanticipated capabilities. If you have clean, perfectly structured data, you are ready to plug in next-generation AI tools to analyze your business.
Right.
But poorly designed blueprints embed constraints. They embed technical debt and compliance nightmares that compound with every single new regulatory change. So for you listening, I want you to just think about the clunky software you have to use at work.
Oh, we all have it.
We all do. Think about the manual data reconciliations you do at the end of the month, or those massive IT projects that get delayed for years. How many of those daily grinding frustrations are just the echoes of a blueprint meeting from 5 years ago where the right expert wasn't invited to the room?
Where someone just skipped the plumbing design.
Exactly.
And, if we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to leave you with one final forward-looking question to just mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've talked extensively today about how keeping your core ERP system as a clean data source is the only way to survive real-time government compliance. But consider what happens in the next few years when global tax authorities themselves start using sophisticated artificial intelligence.
Oh, man. AI audits.
Exactly. What happens when their algorithms instantly cross-reference your foundational enterprise data against your vendor's data and your competitor's data, all in real time looking for anomalies? If your blueprint plumbing isn't designed perfectly today, is your enterprise truly ready to be audited by an algorithm tomorrow?